still here, Stuart. So I used to be quite the fan of the ABC. I've got my radio tuned to Triple J, and currently pushing vaccines on young people with their idol, because this is a world where we have idols who all roll up their sleeves and who will get the publicity for being COVID safe and vaccinated and all the rest. So Karl Krasnitsky, he's coming out there with an ad on Triple J. It's a regularly played ad, you know, where he's telling the young people that this vaccine, this jab, this experimental jab is completely safe. It's 100% safe. It's met all safety requirements. It's gone through all the same trials as regular vaccines. This is the level of misinformation from these people to vulnerable adults who, by the way, have jabbed their whole lives, who are not possibly going to be questioning it. So this person, who's apparently a scientist in Medico who researches avidly, has failed to see the tens and tens of thousands of deaths in relation to these jabs overseas. Never mind this hundreds of thousands of severe adverse events. No acknowledgement that this is a provisionally licensed vaccine. And the drama, another one I used to watch, but I don't anymore, Catch a Glimpse. So one of the presenters there actually went as far as to say, we blame the anti-vaxxers for this pandemic. I mean, you do a double take, don't you? I mean, the rest of them are just beige, rolled up your sleeves, puppets, trumpeting. The only thing that is allowed is truth in this day and age. For anything else, you've got to come to a rally, don't you?
Yeah.
That's good. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Just a bit higher. There we are, that's better. Good. Thank you all for coming out. I'm going to be relatively brief today. I was going to speak about the ABC, but I couldn't resist the temptation to say something about the organisation that's behind me, seeing we're here. I grew up here in Adelaide, and in my day, Channel 9 was a really respectable institution. They ran things like the telethon. Do you remember the telethon? They had news readers, they had journalists, they had television personalities, they called them, of integrity, of manifest integrity.
Not anymore.
And look what's happened now. Look at the people who staff and inhabit the building behind me, and compare them to the kind of people who used to services with broadcasting in this state. I remember Channel 9 had a general manager called Bill Davies, a fine, upright man who'd served his country in World War II. I hope Bill's still alive. I suspect he is, and he would be ashamed to be associated with the organisation behind me. He led it proudly, and look at the state of it now. We're gathered outside, let's face it, we're gathered outside. Did you want to speak? Did you know? Well, just let me speak, then you can have the opportunity to speak. So Kathy used the word, and earlier speakers used the word propaganda, and that's a perfectly appropriate word. I love to look at the origin of words. The word propaganda, I'm sure you know, comes from that word propagate, to reproduce. So it's not just that it's something that's associated with Hitler or the fascists. Propaganda is the reproduction of lies, and look at the power institutions such as this, those who inhabit this building behind me, have to propagate lies. Look at the lies they've propagated during the course of this so-called pandemic since March of last year. the most appalling lies. And this is the curious part. They're lies that are very easily exposed as lies. So what I might do is just take the opportunity just to correct 4 of the very significant lies they've told over these 18 months. Perhaps someone will be listening in here. Perhaps even there's a journalist from Channel 9 who might record it and play it to them in the staff canteen, because there's nothing complicated about this. The first lie, and the lie on which this pandemic has been foundationed, is that the PCR test is indicative of infection, let alone of a case. We all know that it's not. And yet the media has relentlessly, from the morning television through to the evening broadcast, through to the late night broadcast, relentlessly promoted this idea that the city, whichever city they're broadcasting from, is awash with cases. They're awash with PCR infections, which PCR diagnoses, which may or may not be correlate to an infection. And if they correlate to an infection, it may be an asymptomatic infection. We are so far removed. The reality is, a PCR test is so far removed from an infection, it's completely misleading to mention them in the same sentence. And yet relentlessly, this has been promoted by organisations like that behind me. Now, what I'm putting to you isn't controversial. I'm not putting a controversial scientific proposition. In fact, these matters are so uncontroversial, there's no argument about them, and yet the lies are continually propagated. There must be a reason that's happening, and I'm going to briefly examine some of the circumstances that relate to the ownership of this particular organisation behind me, and you might understand why these lies are being propagated, and how it trickles down to the very bottom of the organisation. Last week we had a magnificent rally on Saturday, some 4,000 people. It was reported on Channel 9. Any fair-minded reporter would have firstly given an accurate idea of the numbers. No, several hundred people, something of that order. Look, to be fair to Channel 9, it may have been, the ABC was several hundred people. He may have been more, but he was significantly short of the mark. And then, during the course of the march, the peaceful march that went down North Terrace and then back down Grenfell Street to Rundle Park, instead of interviewing the many, many hundreds, if not thousands of supporters who lined the rally and said positive things about it, he picks a couple of old ladies off the street, fully masked, who say they're scared of catching infections. Now, it's when you think about it, we can get angry about it, but why does this happen? Why does a young man, it was a young man on this occasion, otherwise apparently quite sentient and intelligent, why is he doing that? Does he never ask himself why he's doing it? Probably not, because the key problem with these media organisations is their incuriosity. Perhaps they should be more curious. If they were more curious, we might have had an adult question asked at the 43 press conferences that the three amigos have had during the course of this pandemic. Not one sensible, penetrating question asked by any member of the media in Adelaide. This is a disgrace. It's an astonishing disgrace, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And we're here at the weekend, we're outside of their organisation, we're pleading with them to have the decency and the intellectual integrity to start examining the truth of these matters, and if they don't hear us when we're parked outside of their building, maybe we'll have to go inside it. Peacefully, I assure you, but maybe we're going to have to go inside it. I've watched recently a very useful documentary made in Romania in relation to the Romanian Revolution in 1989, and that was a key part of the recovery by the Romanian people of their liberty when they seized the broadcasting institutions. Even in older wars or in older rebellions, it was always the post office they went to because that was the telegraph facility. Well, this is the modern equivalent of the telegraph facility during the course of those 19th century revolutions. And if they don't start showing some integrity and serving the people, serving their fellow citizens with the promulgation of the truth, we'll have to go inside the building and take it back. Now, one doesn't want to get personal about it, but they may have to look at the kind of people they hire. Perhaps it's just a lack of any intellectual substance that's the problem. A lot of these reporters and newsreaders in particular, get very offended if you describe them as witless, intellectually barren bimbos. Well, there's one way of dealing with that. Stop being one. Start accessing the truth that's freely available to you through all kinds of non-mainstream media organisations. Now, the researches that I did in relation to Channel 9, let me very briefly summarise them as this. Channel 9 merged with the Fairfax organisation in 2018. It has 5 major shareholders, and all of those shareholders are what you might call institutional investment trusts. And as you might expect, all of them fully aboard what we all can clearly see now, and we can see the integers of it very clearly when we describe it as a globalist agenda. One of the 5 major shareholders is an organisation that's charmingly called the Fidelity International, the Fidelity International Trust. And the Fidelity International Trust has some fairly interesting partners around the world. So bear in mind what I'm saying. 5 major shareholders in Channel 9. One of the 5 is the Fidelity Trust. The Fidelity Trust was named in the US Congress in 2019 and chastised in the US Congress because of their entry into a lucrative partnership with an organisation called Hikvision, Hikvision. Now, Hikvision is a Chinese state corporation, and Hikvision has one and one only focus of business activity, and it's the manufacture and installation of surveillance equipment. And it's the manufacture and installation of surveillance equipment in Jiangxing province in the northwest of China, where 1 million Uyghurs are held in detention. Now think about that for a moment. Channel 9, this organisation that Bill Davies graced and that graced this city for many generations, one of the 5 major shareholders in it thinks it's acceptable to do business with an organisation that through the most modern forms of technology identifies the people that need to be arrested and then surveils them ruthlessly when they're in concentration camps. Channel 9, this is your life. And do you notice how the media organisations don't investigate each other? So why wouldn't the ABC be looking into these connections Channel 9 have? They don't look into each other because they're all made up of the same globalist enterprise.
Exactly right.
Now, and finally, can I just say this? Journalism's not something I've ever practiced, but you recognise a journalist of integrity the moment you see him or her. And my advice to the Channel 9 journalists who are shaming their organisations and shaming themselves is firstly, acquire a conscience. Firstly, acquire a conscience. My second piece of advice to them is have a look at someone like Avi Yemeni of the Rebel News organisation. Not only is he, in my view, a first-rate journalist and a purveyor of truth, he's courageous, he's happy to conduct the fight on his own, he's fearless, he's taken the blows, he's taken the arrests, He doesn't have a massive media organisation behind him. The money has to be raised online. It's a persecuted media organisation, Rebel News in Canada, where it is based. So my advice to those Channel 9 journalists is have a look at how you can conduct your professional life with dignity.
Yep.
Imagine being able to do your job during the day like Abby Yemeni does, and being able to go home and tell your children how proud you are of how you've carried out your task of telling the truth that day. Just use your imagination. I'd invite all of the people who occupy that building behind me, and they might be able to do the same when they return to their homes. Thank you for listening to me, ladies and gentlemen.